Welcome, everyone. We're going to do some quick introductions while people are joining us. This will also be recorded so that people can go back to it if they missed anything or they want to revisit anything. But thank you all so much for joining us during our Stalking Awareness Month activities. I'm Lauren. I'm the managing director of Stop Stalking Us, which was founded by Lily Baldwin. Lily and I first met when she went public with her stalking story in 2016. And we know that as we talk about our personal experiences, that others can start to share their stories as well, and we can continue to grow our community and have strength in numbers to move past just awareness and really move into action and change the landscape of stalking. And I say that community part in part today because we're so lucky to be joined by Lenora Claire, who I think is like the patron saint of stalking victims.
Yes.
Lenora has helped so many people navigate this form of violence and connect people together so that we can also support each other. If I went through all of Lenora's jobs and roles, I think we would use up the full hour. But we're so lucky to have her here with Cletus Carlton, who's former LAPD and a partner at Special K Investigations. So let's go ahead and dive in. I was going to just start by asking each of you to tell me about your backgrounds and how you ended up in this line of work. And within that, if you can also share how you two met, that would be awesome. Cletus, do you want to start telling us a bit about just your background and how you ended up here?
Sure, absolutely. I was a police detective with the LAPD. I did over 32 years. My last unit of assignment was threat management. And what we specialized in was long-term, complicated, high-profile in stalking cases involving celebrities, dignitaries, chiefs of police. We were actually assigned to some of the city council members. So when they got stalked or harassed, we'd actually handle those cases. So it was actually a high-tech unit. And how I actually met Lenora was that there was a major case, actually Lenora's case, that no one wanted to handle. So I liked the complicated cases, so I actually took it. I was able to meet Lenora, and during our interactions, we became friends. And I was able to get her case to the level that she needed it, and got it prosecuted the way she wanted it prosecuted. And then soon after I retired, we stayed friends, but she had an interest in investigations, and she's a big stalking advocate. So now we're together as partners in a Special K Investigations for stalking victims.
Amazing. Lenora, what about you?
Yeah. Okay. A couple things. First, I'll say I always love how honest Cletus is. He just tells it like nobody wanted my case because it was so complicated, so involved, multi-jurisdictions, involved the Trumps, the Kardashians, like you name it. And it's true. And I'm just going to speak frankly. Look, prior to Cletus, I think I had like 10 detectives. They just shuffled me around for so long and not great experience. So, things really clicked when he came on the case. But as far as background, as far as who I am, I always kind of start by saying I'm a multi-violent crime survivor, because a lot of us, it's not just one crime, one traumatic event we're dealing with. I've been stalked since 2011. I am obviously an advocate and activist. I'm here in that capacity today. I'm a long-term entertainment industry professional. I have the first business that I have, which is Lenora Claire Consulting, where I work with survivors trying to tell their story in the media, making sure it's done in ethical ways. I'm a founding member of the LA District Attorney Crime Victims Advisory Board, where I advise for gender-based violence for the city of LA. And now I'm super excited to be a partner at Special K, where I'm here with Cletus and Leo. Leo's not here because Leo's an undercover guy. So because he's an undercover guy, and it's funny because he's so charming and you would love him, but he cannot be here because he doesn't show his face. And so as far as my journey into the PI side of things, and I'm currently, my title's investigator. I'm not licensed yet. It takes several years and hours. So I'm being trained by the best. But when I realized that, just frankly, there's a lot of things law enforcement can't or won't do. And there's this sort of space of all the other things that we need, right? Whether it's like when you come to us, you can get tech support, security, we're trauma informed. And one of the amazing things that Cletus and Leo do is if you so want, like a lot of people, they might be more comfortable speaking to me than law enforcement directly. Or, maybe it's Cletus who's on the case and he's an amazing liaison. And so he, uses his connections, his expertise, and literally does that thing because sometimes it's just too much. You're in your intense space, all this stuff is happening, and you're like, I just can't talk to cops right now. But Cletus is delightful and I will happily talk to him. So that sort of explains, I think, a little bit about, we'll get into the business of what we do, but that's how I met Cletus and our sort of journey together.
Yep.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you sort of work in a field that people both like feel familiar with, and also it's like most of that is from like TV and movies, which I would imagine like doesn't feel like that in sort of like a day-to-day basis. Um, but yeah, what does that actually sort of like look like to be a private investigator, particularly ones that focus on stalking? What's sort of like the range of things you're doing, and what does that sort of mean to be a private investigator in this space?
Well, one, you have to have the expertise. What I get feedback from other clients is that they hire a lot of people that have no expertise. So basically, they take their money and they basically smooth them over and they do nothing for them. So that's where our agency comes into play because one, we have compassion for our victims, and then two, we have the expertise, and then three, we want to make sure you get prosecution. That's our whole goal: is keep you safe and get your prosecution. So that's what we offer that I think no one else offers. Plus, we also offer something else that no one else does, is that stalking cases are long term. And so we offer a flat fee, 1 year of service. And that way you can call us 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we'll be able to assist you and help you. Because most people, they're anxious, they have a lot of anxiety, they get shuffled by law enforcement. They don't quite know what to do. They can't call a lawyer on Friday at 5 o'clock, Friday at night. They can call us and we'll be able to help them out and guide them, get them where they need to be. At least to get rid of that anxiety from them. So that's what we offer.
Yeah. Another thing I want to add too is that even just from like the risk assessment and the minimization, right? Like a lot of people, they're nervous and they're like, how bad is it? What's going on? And then ultimately, what can I do to be safe? That's all the sort of stuff that we come in and we give them those tools, right? Like Cletus will literally come to your house and do a security check and be like, okay, lights over here, cameras over here, trim these bushes.
Yep.
I can hop over this thing. You got to change, which is like amazing. And I'm sorry, but law enforcement, they don't do that for you. And then it's also with like the risk minimization stuff. There's other experts we could bring in. We could bring in forensic psychologists if you need that sort of, statement for court, or, there's just, it's a dream team. It's assembling all the things that victim survivors really need that everyone like doesn't realize that all these things can be put together. It's no different. Your background, when we make a production team, right? And we have everybody filling all these roles, and that's what we do.
That's yeah, really incredible. So when you start working with a client or talking to somebody, what does that process kind of look like? Are there certain things with a case where you're sort of checking to see like, is this something where we feel like we can be meaningfully helpful? Is there like an onboarding process to familiarize yourself? What does that kind of like those early logistics look like?
Well, what we do is every case is different. They're not all the same, even though they are kind of the same. They're totally different. We try to do like a case biopsy to find out exactly what's going on and what direction we're going to take their case. One of the first things we do is we go out and do a security assessment of their home. And the reason why we do that, because most people, believe it or not, they don't have lighting, they don't have cameras. Some people don't even lock their doors. So we go out, we do them a security assessment and then we try to do other things like Nora said earlier, like, for example, we have other people that work with us. We have a cyber tech guy. We have another guy that does actually scans cars to make sure if your car's been tagged. We have another person that does background checks for us that's expert in that. So we kind of expand, we try to see what they need and we kind of push them in that direction. But the most important thing is actually talking to the client to see exactly what took place and where they stand with their case. Give an example of it. A lot of times they'll come to us, they've already tried to get a restraining order. And I hope that most of them don't do it until they have us involved in it, because there's a lot more steps involved in a restraining order. If you go and you file for a restraining order and you don't get it, you go back again and again. It's like the boy who cried wolf. They will not give you a restraining order, even though you have everything you need for it. They won't give it to you. So we highly encourage that, and we work with everybody. So that's just how we start off with.
Yeah, and just to add, so the sort of how it usually works is typically a lot of the clients, because of, you know, my reputation or profile or story came out or whatever, a lot of times they come to me directly, and then I'll have a conversation with them. We'll sort of figure it out. And what have you done? What do you oh, you've pursued some stuff civilly. Oh, that didn't, the cease and desist didn't work for you. Okay, you know, and so I sort of have the survivor to survivor conversation, which I think is really helpful, because you know that I've had that lived experience. You know that this is my reality, right? So a lot of times I do almost like the pre-intake, right? And we just sort of relate to each other. So I find out what's going on. And there's a real, if I could just say, sort of caring touch. I might have conversations that most PIs wouldn't have. You know, you're telling me that your new boyfriend really isn't handling this well, and I'm able to sort of talk to you about that. So I handle a lot of the emotional side of stuff as well that you wouldn't get in most places. And then, you know, when I think like, okay, this is a serious situation, that's when I bring Cletus and Leo in, and then we all kind of triage and exactly,
Yep.
as you said, it all kind of comes in. But I just want people to know that you're getting that as well, right? You're getting a lot of that stuff, which is something that I've not heard of. And it is another thing, while we have the opportunity, is that a lot of people that are coming to us now are sex workers, because they're coming from a place where, especially if you're on OnlyFans, as we've learned, if you're like a top creator, you're probably not even, you have a team that's talking to your people. So you may not even know who your problem people are, but now something has happened and you're at risk. And so I just wanted to take a moment and really highlight that we really enjoy working with that community, and we've had great experiences, and just sort of put that out there as well. So I had a moment, just because that's, you know, typically a community who maybe didn't really feel so comfortable going to law enforcement. So we are very happy to work with them. And we're also licensed in California and Nevada. So a lot of that community is between both places.
Yep, exactly.
That makes sense, and I think is so important too. It's like when stalking is such a unique crime, and it's like when you've gone through it, there's also, when you're talking to other survivors, such a shorthand. So you don't have to like be sitting and saying to someone like, well, you know, telling them like, okay, I got 100 roses delivered, and to have people be like, oh, that's so romantic, that's such a nice gesture. It's like you can kind of cut through all that bullshit
Yep.
and just be like, here's what's happened, and to understand that, like, that, yeah, to understand that piece of it. And Lenora, I know you've been through this process for so long. Like, kind of seeing this side of things now, what are the things that sort of like surprise you the most, or things that like you really wish young Lenora had known now that you've seen like the other side of it?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so everybody kind of focuses like, we need better laws. And while that is true, if the enforcement of the current laws aren't happening, right? Because let's just say maybe law enforcement isn't taking you seriously, and maybe they're not taking you seriously because maybe they don't have that training, or maybe you're not preparing your evidence correctly and you're coming in and it's all, you know, it's like we really show you, we put it together. We basically, I'll just say, package it so that they take it across the finish line. We do all that work, right? So, you know, definitely in my moments of, like in the very, very beginning, before I got to Cletus, when I was at a different division of LAPD, I was really hysterical. I was getting, you know, death threats, rape threats, and they were unkind to me. But I also realized that I was, you know, bringing in like weird stacks of, you know, I was just like, look at Ruby, you know, and it's like, I wasn't, and again, it's awful to say that you have to be this sort of put together. You should be able to come in crisis, but that isn't necessarily the reality. So much of the process, from how to package it, as Cletus said, the difficulty with restraining order, there's so many complications, especially now post counterman. And if your viewers aren't familiar with counterman, there was a Supreme Court ruling recently that had to do with intent and threats, right? And so a lot of times people are like, oh, well, their intent is this and it doesn't pass that. So we can really help you navigate. They do not make it easy for you. So everything from, you know, we can help you with the restraining order process to even like the anxiety survivors have about what the hell do I wear to court? You know, like I will have those conversations with you. I've been in that place. So when you say what did younger Lenora, there's everything, you know, there's so many, even the stuff like the delivery, right? Like you work so hard, you get that restraining order. For me, it took me like literally years. There was no difficulty. My case was such that he had a history, the threats were very direct. A lot of these, you know, these abusers, these offenders, they're sly, you know, they're sneaky. They know how to get away with it. Mine, because he's so mentally out there, he was very clear. So getting the restraining order wasn't hard, but for me, it was serving him. It took literally years to get him served. So
Yep.
there's so many things that are part of this. And again, you know, people will go, a restraining order is just a piece of paper, but it's that piece of paper you need to move forward to prosecution. And then the other thing, if I'm just going to put it out there. When people say to me, I'm so sorry this happened to you, that implies a past tense quality, which there is no past tense quality. It is ongoing, as Cleta said. These things usually do not wrap themselves up in a time, you know, it's not like this awful 2 weeks. Like that's really not the experience most people have. And for me personally, even after I did have incarceration, even if I did have that, which was an amazing reprieve, 3 days after he got out, he was offending again. So, you know, those sort of things, having a team that you could, like, I didn't have that team until eventually Cletus, and then Cletus retired and he became a PI. So I was like to have that team that you could call for whatever it is that you need is just, it's everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And Cletus, are there things that you feel like that you wish, I guess, are there places where you feel like there can be people who are on the inside of law enforcement who may just not know, you know, are there things that like you wish you could sort of like take back to your buddies, or is the system just kind of like so broken down? And I know often people aren't sort of properly resourced, trained, that there may be sort of like, you know, especially in smaller areas. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious what yeah, your feeling is now that you're not in the department anymore.
Well, I've been retired 6 years now, and I've seen a great decrease in expertise. There's no expertise anymore. It's gone. And I saw that right before I retired. Um, this was way before defund the police. I mean, they just got to the point where you have budget cuts. You don't have people lining up to be police officers anymore, like they used to be when I did back in the 70s and 80s, unfortunately. But uh, there's no expertise. And what happens is that you have these officers being trained by officers who don't know the training themselves. So you have nobody with training. If you ask the average officer on the street right now about stalking, they couldn't tell you what the penal code section is. They couldn't tell you if it was a felony or a misdemeanor. And they wouldn't know how to investigate or even get started with it. And they don't want anything to do with something they don't know. And it's unfortunate they don't have training anymore. And it's sad, but that's the decline of law enforcement. So when I have to talk to, like, give another example, I went with a celebrity. His officer at the front desk did not want to take a report. I had to explain to him that it was a mandated report, which is mandated means by California, you shall take a report. And if you don't take a report, it's called neglected duty for law enforcement, which you can get in trouble and or termination. And I had to explain to this young officer about it. And his supervisor came out, I had to explain it to him. So it's like it's this trickle down effect that no, there's like the blind leading the blind. And this is where we're at right now. So this is where when I take the cases, I have to go with my victims to the police station, and I have to have basically the stream liaison of letting them know that I'm with this person, and you have to take care of them because they're not going to be able to kiss them off like they do a lot of times, kiss them off and not take reports, and they don't investigate them. So that's where we come into play.
Yeah, and Cletus, that was awesome. I want to give an example of exactly what Cletus is talking about. We have a client now who wasn't a client at the time. He was just a friend of mine, popular OnlyFans personality, helped get the restraining order, had the restraining order, had a public event, and sure enough, the stalker shows up. The venue saw the restraining order because I told this person, you always have it. He was great. He had it on his phone. They said, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get involved. And I said, okay, well, the sheriffs are literally a block away. Call them. Sheriffs took, I think, 2 hours. They got there. I got there faster than the sheriffs did. Sheriffs didn't want to make an arrest, and the individual was there acting crazy, circling him, didn't want to do anything. And that's when I was like, Cletus, we got to get involved. Cletus got involved, and then
Yep.
didn't you go to, I think it was like West Hollywood City Council with him?
Oh yeah, we had numerous
Yeah.
things with law enforcement there. But with my liaison and talking to them, and they knew I knew the ins and outs and my expertise, we were able to work with the city council. We were able to work with the
Yeah.
captain, and we got exactly what we needed for it.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Where else do you get this? Like that's not a thing. Usually you would just be like, wait, I did the thing, I got the restraining order and I'm still screwed. Like that's usually the reality for us, right? So I just wanted to give that practical example of sort of what
Perfect,
we're
yeah.
facing. Yeah. And so that's what I mean. If you need us to go to your local city council, that will happen because that's what we do. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. How have you seen maybe in the 6 years since you've left Cletus, like stalking tactics change, and how have you sort of worked to like respond to that because as it continues to shift?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll explain it to you. When I first got in the stalking unit, I got 3 different tours. I went in and out several times in the unit. Third time, I wound up retiring from them. The first time I went in the unit, it was all by letters, and they would send like dolls with nooses around their neck and blood. That was my first tour, and then when I left and I came back, the second tour had to do with more technology, like with spoofing, where somebody gets your phone number and spoofing and stuff like that. And then my last tour had to do with actual social media. And what they do now is since everybody has a open forum, people feel they can attack anybody they want to and harass and stalk them. And that's the difference between those 3 times, how technology is taken off, basically. So what you have now is most of the stalking is through social media, and it's deep. It's straight up more threatening than it was before when I first got in the unit. I mean, it's really threatening because most people have that emboldenment of I can attack somebody and I can be anonymous in doing it. But there's ways and tools of doing it. It's just the only problem is with law enforcement; they're so overwhelmed that it takes time to do search warrants. And I'll give you another example of law enforcement. When I first came into law enforcement, everybody worked with us for search warrants. They give us whatever we want. But as time went down, it got to the point where, because of legal ramifications, a lot of people just wouldn't give us information that we needed. So you may have to write 2 or 3 search warrants to get one thing that you needed, where before they would give you everything. So it's long, it's tedious, it's months and weeks down the road. It's nothing quick, and sometimes you just don't get what you need. And if you don't get what you need, prosecution-wise, they just won't prosecute the cases. So they're not going to spend any time working on a case where they know they're not going to prosecute it. So that's when the victims will call in, and law enforcement will take the report, maybe or maybe not, and they may not investigate it. And that's where they get lost and shuffled in the system.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, I have like so many things swimming around in my head, and this is all such interesting work and just so great to have your perspective. I'm curious sort of how what you do for risk assessment and if that's part of your process. And if there's tools that people can use, because I know that's also hard to understand, and there's no guarantee of like, well, if he hasn't done this, it means he won't do that, right? Like we know it's not so formulaic. But just as kind of the patterns that you've seen, like what that that piece of it looks like.
Okay, well, I'll give you an example of that. That's actually a really good question, because what happens is most people don't realize that they're a serious victim. And what happens is that, for example, they'll get flowers. They say, they just brush it off. Someone comes to their door at night, knocks on the door. They don't think anything of it. Things escalate, and most people don't understand the escalation process. And that's where I try to explain about risk assessment, because most people think if someone's kind of given another. Well, let me give a prime example. There was a celebrity, and he was being stalked by a female. She was very short. She's like 4 feet, maybe 4'5". She's really short. And their assessment was that she's not a danger. And my assessment is you can't predict behavior, because anybody can pull a trigger, anybody can get a knife, and it depends on who they are and what they're all about. So that's where the risk assessment comes into play. That I take all the cases as high risk. They can always downgrade it to low risk, but you got to take it high because you don't know what these people are all about, especially once you do a background check on them and find out where they're coming from. You just got to make sure that everybody's high risk, and you teach people how to safeguard themselves. That little things actually mean bigger things down the road. And a lot of cases come up where people they'll realize as time goes on that they should have done things that they didn't realize that were serious back because they didn't see it as that. Because most people don't realize, like law enforcement, you're always looking over your shoulder. You look at everything bad in the worst case scenario. Most people don't do that. So that's where we come into play.
Yeah, I just
And
know. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lenore.
Oh, I was going to say, and just to sort of, add to what Cletus is saying, just sort of anecdotally, when I'm talking to victims and survivors, there's like two things that I see a lot. One, I call the FBI helicopter. We'll get into that in a minute. But the other one is the general minimization. I can't tell you how many individuals where it's just too scary. You just don't want to deal with the reality of what's happening to you. So you brush it off because it's just too much. And that's always painful for me because I have to sit and be like, no, like, for example, there's one thing that I learned about like the depersonalization of the language of threats. You are being spoken about like an object. It is very easy to create physical harm to an object. This person doesn't see you as a person. You are a thing. They want to harm you. Like I could point out that language to them. And then the FBI helicopter is where sometimes people are just, it's shit talk on the internet. It's just some random is being, and it's really sort of helping them determine what is, because when I say FBI helicopter, they're like, someone called me ugly, call the FBI helicopter to save me. And you're like, okay, that's the internet. The internet, unfortunately, can be a very mean place. But sometimes it takes experts to go, oh, no. This isn't just some person being mean. Like you are being targeted. And also it's the repetitive, like this is multiple instances. This isn't just like one, like, so we kind of really help them understand that. If people want to sort of really like sharp, there's the sharp risk assessment tool that Spark has. If you just kind of, let's like an entry point, if people just are sort of at home and kind of wondering, like, is it time to call a PI? That's a great free little resource that they could use. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. Again, it's not as complete as talking to an actual expert, but it's something.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to put that in the comments. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of times when we think of public figures, like you do think of a celebrity or somebody who has these followings, but in our world too, it's like so many of that. It might be a store owner, it might be, an advocate for a different issue that kind of puts them in front of people. And yeah, to be able to have that distinction between like, okay, I'm getting all these like really vile messages from people or these inappropriate or like over personalized things, but to be able to pull out and say like, but this one or these two, like these are different, these are more concerning, and this is part of a pattern that we need to to go into, and giving people the tools to understand that. And also there's so much noise, like how do you pull out what's actually something that people should be aware of and focusing on.
Which is also great because you bring up, we live in this culture now where it's like, we used to call them celebrities, but now everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody's got a podcast, everybody's on YouTube, right? So honestly, if you're a creator like that and you're just getting all these things and it's just, you don't know what to make of it, then it's great to have us on retainer to just send us and be like, is person A, B, C, or D your problem? And then we can help you with that. So that's like another way that somebody could utilize us if they're just realizing, because unfortunately, the larger your profile gets, the more wonderful opportunities and then the more scary people who can come your way.
Right.
Totally. And I think that's part of to what we see as the violence of stalking, which anybody that's gone through it knows that. But for people who maybe have a loved one that has, or they're not familiar with it, that, sort of robbing people of those opportunities, forcing people to make themselves smaller. Lenora, I know you've talked about this too, right? People being like, well, just change your hair, just do this, just do this, like all of these things that aren't addressing the problem and aren't going to change the actual piece of it, but just the the way that people's lives get impacted. And we've seen that some things that might be small of like, no, it's really violent to force somebody to change all of these things about their lives, and expensive, and just violating in so many different ways. So even if there's not like a physical wound, you can see there's all this invisible violence and invisible scarring and things that victims have to deal with. Um, can you talk a little bit more about like your liaison work and what that looks like?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like I said earlier, law enforcement's changed and they don't have the expertise and they don't have anybody. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not trying to badmouth law enforcement, but some of them just don't care. And you go up to there with your issue and your problem, and that nobody wants to assist you. So what happens with our company is that we actually go with you because you have to talk the law enforcement talk. And if you don't know the law enforcement talk, you're not probably not going to go very far. And I gave you a couple examples of it, like the one we had in where we had to get with the city council member. I mean, that was between I, and the lieutenant and the city council member. We had to get together, and it was just something basic. It was just a basic stalking case. It wasn't. I mean, it was egregious, but it wasn't to where. I mean, to me, if I was back and working in LAPD, it would be just a normal stalking case. I mean, they just don't handle the basic stuff. So, I mean, when it comes to liaison, that's where we come into play because you're going to have somebody who knows the knowledge of stalking and they know the terminology of it and what's serious and what's not serious and what they need to document. And then we also offer the service of liaison to help their detective, whoever it may be, male or female, whether they have experience or not, help them understand the laws pertaining to and the prosecution pertaining to stalking. And it's important that you get somebody that knows what they're talking about. And that's where we come to play.
Yeah, and then just to add one thing, because everything Cleta said, I've seen it, it's all true. There's a bunch of other factors and things that people don't realize too. You know, like with my case, when we got my arrest, there was $1 million bail. There's no bail in LA County right now, right? And so sometimes law enforcement will say things like, what's the point of arrest? They're just going to be right out. Or they maybe have issues with the DA and they go, soft DA isn't going to try. Like there's so many things. And then it takes somebody like Cletus going, no, 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 no. We're going to do this thing. Like, you know, you can't, because they can be pretty dismissive, you know, or again, sorry to say it, but we've seen the fake report writing, you know, I'm writing it
Yep.
down. And like, you know, they're not pulling that when he's looking over their shoulder. Like that's you know, that's so valuable. The fact it's somebody holding them accountable, right? So you get the emotional side of it where you're getting that support. You're not going in alone. You have the team, but also he can be like, oh, so and the other thing too, and I can say this as a victim survivor, so often we're kept in the dark. We don't know what's going on, but we also don't want to annoy them because then are they going to not take our calls or not? So it's great to have, you know, have Cletus there to literally do that so that we can maintain our status as a helpful, pleasant victim, and then kind of let him handle the things that we aren't calling every day with what's my update? What's my update? Because that is a very real thing.
Yeah, and also add into that also, we've had issues too where they're actually had police at the scene and they do have an active restraining order and the officers don't want to act on it. And that's where they'll call me and I have to explain to the officers that it's a mandate by the judge, not by the officers, that they shall arrest and they don't arrest for it. So that makes it difficult too. So that's where we come into play with that quite a bit. And actually seems to be going on a lot more now than it has in the last year. So that's another tool that we actually like to use to help our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have clients that come to you that like don't necessarily want to go the route of prosecution and are like, I don't want to ever be in a courtroom with this person, like I just want it to stop? And are there other interventions sort of outside of that that you've seen or that you've done or that you think are, you know, one way to just get the behavior to change or stop?
Yeah, we do. We get quite a different, like I said, every case is different. They're not all the same. And not everybody, most people, to be honest with you, don't want to prosecute. They don't want to end up in court. They don't want to see this person. They don't want anything to do with them. And we don't want them to be in court with them, to be honest with you. So what we try to do intervention. Our intervention is basically tell these people we need to stop. Basically like a cease and desist by an attorney. You got to stop. We got investigators going to be following and watching you, prosecuting you, reporting you to the police department. And sometimes that will stop people. Not really stop them, but slow them down a little bit. Because now they know they're looking over their shoulder, wondering if we're watching them to prosecute them. Because a lot of them are not stalking one victim, they're stalking multiple victims. So with that, what we do is we actually manage and monitor stalkers. And by doing that, it actually eliminates a lot of prosecution because they know they're being monitored. And every time they do something, we document it down. So the client will have it, and the client's always one step ahead of them instead of being behind. And that's the greatest service that I love. That's what I wanted to do when I worked for LAPD. Unfortunately, they didn't see eye to eye with my experience and how I wanted to do it, because I like to manage and monitor all the stalkers and keep them in check. And that's what we do.
That's exactly right. And to add to that, we have one client where, you know, in the monitoring, without getting too into it, I was able to like come back and be like, this individual is heavily on drugs right now. This is what's
Yep.
going on with this person. This is, you know, and that you don't get that kind of information anywhere else, you know. So we have different channels and ways of finding things. And the monitoring, sometimes it's the knowing. That's exactly it. It's like, oh, my person's been quiet for a while. Am I okay? Or what's going on? Oh, it's because they're right. So that information is so valuable because that's all we have, right? When we're living with this hypervigilance, when we're living in this state. And sometimes the quiet is the scary part because you're like, where's it going to come from, right? But if we give you that bit of information that helps you, again, just feel sort of in control, empowered, and get you back there, it's emotionally so valuable.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know that's something too that, yeah, I mean, I think we're all good at holding a lot of truths at the same time. And there's a lot of nuance and a lot of this stuff that it's like, it shouldn't be this way, but also it is. So like we have to talk about the systemic changes and all of these things different than the sort of like everyday practical advice when people do kind of have to be their own investigators or their own, evidence collectors. And the toll of that and being able to know both how to do that and also like when they may get to a point where that's not enough or that's not working and that they need to bring in other experts or professionals to help navigate that. I guess, are there things that like I guess just more broadly like that you wish that either like that you're like, I wish that every sort of stalking victim knew this thing or knew about this resource or yeah, something that you just kind of wish was more common knowledge?
You want to answer that first, Lenore, then I can answer after?
Uh, yeah. So, okay. So we got the new stalking stats a while ago, and the old ones, the ones from like 2014 that we were going off of, it was kind of more like overwhelmingly intimate partner, right? And then it was like very, again, the 2014 stats, more like mine, stranger acquaintance. And now that we have the new stats, it's like more 50-50, right? And so I wish people like understood that because a lot of times, well, there's two different ways to look at it. When I talk to people with a former intimate partner, a lot of times they carry this guilt with them. I dated this person, I let this person into my life. And it's like, well, that's what predators do. I always say it's like a dog with rabies. You see a cute dog and you pet the dog. You didn't know the dog was sick. Same thing with those situations, right? And then with the stranger stuff, there's people who are like, they don't take it seriously because they're like, I don't know, this is some weirdo who lives all the way out there. And it's like, yeah, my weirdo lived across the country and he came, so it's really, I just want people to sort of understand that the internet, and we talked about this, is changing things, and that there's different disorders, like, for example, erotomania, which is one of the ones that my stalker has, where he has a false relationship with me. He thinks we're married at times, or other times I'm the head of a Zionist conspiracy. Like, he thinks all kinds of things that are not accurate. And, a lot of times it's very easy to brush that off as something. So I just want to validate people's experience, that whether it is former intimate partner, that is terrifying because they know your friends, they know your family, they know your patterns, and that's its own kind of thing. And ultimately that is not your fault. You were just out there, just trying to have love. Nothing wrong with that. And the same thing with if it is some stranger out there, they could be a threat, and you do have to take it seriously. And sometimes it does take that intervention to know what that is. And then the other thing that I always tell people is that your home address is on the internet. It just is. If you have not wiped it, it is out there. So please be aware of that. We can help you remove that. There's tons and tons of ways, but like it costs one whole dollar. I can know where you live. I can know the car you lease. I can know where your family lives, like literally $1. And it is terrifying. And if you don't believe me, write me and I will write you back with your address because that's how it is. If you haven't wiped it, that's something really important that people need to know. And then the other thing, and I'll let Cletus because he has such great value, but just find community if you're being stalked. It's such an isolating crime, and that's what they do. They try to isolate us. They try to make us afraid. They make us feel like we're crazy. Is that there are different places and different communities, and to sort of reach out because a lot of times you can have a well-intentioned loved one, like they want to help you, but they don't know what to say. So like they're afraid to say something, so they don't actually say anything. And then, there's all these sort of dynamics that are complicated, right? So you definitely need to find your community. And there's a ton of places like if people want, obviously if they know you guys already, you're off to a good start. There's Spark. And, if people have questions about where to find community, they can always reach out to me and I can help direct them to stuff because this is not something that you want to experience alone. It's really important to have other people that are going through it to talk to.
Well said. That's the biggest thing that I have an issue with is that the system makes them victims. And then what happens is they reach out to law enforcement and people that they believe are going to help them. They become a victim a second time. So it's like a double victim. And the anxiety and the stress level that I feel from them all the time is because I have compassion for all these people is that they have nowhere to go and they don't know who to trust and who to talk to. And I wish there was more people like Lenore and that had compassion and actually want to help people and do the right thing, put them in the right location, right direction. And I just wish there was more sources out there for people like that.
Yeah. And for us, that's why I think the community building, like it doesn't end there, but it starts there. And also as we talk about, that there are, stalkers are often doing this to more than one people, it also reinforces to me that like there are more of us than there are them. And by breaking those silos of isolation and shame and
Yep.
coming together, that like it becomes harder for people to ignore those voices or to not take it seriously or to wait until something horrific happens and then be like, oh, well, actually there were, 5 million red flags. And this was, could have been predicted all along. But people didn't act. When you talk about Lenore, like mentioned, like wiping people's like information from the internet, is that something that like you need to hire somebody to help you with, or are there other like resources that people can do on their own?
Right. Like most things in life, you can either do it yourself or you can hire somebody, right? It's what you have the capacity to, what your resources are. There are like, if you're going to do it yourself, there was an article that was written a couple of years ago by LifeWire I can send to you, and it doesn't have all the things, but it has kind of the big ones. And you just have to go to manually opt out of like all these websites. And so it is something that you can do. Or if you're like, I do not have 8 hours to do this right now, I'm busy with my child, or whatever you're doing. There's companies like Delete Me that hire, I think it's like $150 or something, and they think they do it for like a year, because the other problem with these websites is they just pop up again. Like they'll take you down and then 6 months later. So like another thing is I always like put yourself on Google Alert, you kind of see what's happening too. But yeah, there's a tremendous amount of sites. And then there's a few things like in California, there's like the Delete Act where they're trying to get rid of this stuff. But again, the technology and the laws are so like not on the same page that it's not happening anytime soon. And the last thing you want is for someone to have your home address. And I'm telling you, when you go to these websites, it shows all your content, like it'll show your family. It shows everybody. So it's really important. And the amount of personal information is crazy that you can get on there. Everything from like I can look people and be like, oh, you didn't pay your taxes 3 years ago? Like I know everything about you. So it's really important to wipe yourself off.
Yeah. I wanted to go back because I think it's really interesting what you were talking to about. Yeah, I think a lot of times people be like, oh, well, that guy couldn't be a creep. He's so charming. Where the reality is that, like, if somebody shows up and they're an asshole or a monster or whatever, like, you wouldn't talk to them like you would leave them, right? And that so often those things that people say like, oh well, she seems so lovely or whatever it is, that's part of the tactic of getting people close to you, or of going to a neighbor to be like, oh, I'm an old friend from college, and because I know these details about this person, like I just was dropping this off and can you help me, whatever those like things are that people might brush off and be like, oh, they seem totally fine. And we'll hear in a couple weeks from Deja Sade, who was stalked. And yeah, officers are like, I talked to him and I think it's just a miscommunication. He seemed like a really
Yes.
nice guy.
That's quite
And so
common.
like how do you kind
Yep.
of like uh break that for people to get them to understand that it's those things aren't opposites, it's like they're different sides of the same coin.
Predators
Yeah.
are good at predation.
Yeah.
That's their thing. They know when to smell blood in the water, and by that I
Yep.
mean like, they know when to find people who are maybe vulnerable. Like I never talk about my DV. Everyone's so focused on my stalking story, but my DV situation happened right after my father died. I was vulnerable. I was not in a great place, and I just needed someone to get me the hell out of the house. And this man came in and acted, he loved bombed me, he did all those things. That's why I really understand, even though my stalker wasn't former intimate partner, I very much understand how those things happened, right? So it's like anything else, like predators, they develop the skills. Fortunately, my stalker just is, you can see him a mile away as a problem person. That doesn't stop him from but as far as some of the scariest ones are the ones who were so charming and they infiltrate
Absolutely.
life, and they're
Yes.
skilled. They're so skilled, you
Yep.
know, and that's why I always have to like let people take that guilt. It's like, this is somebody they just got this literally predator instinct, right? Like they just have these things, they can see things in people, and the way that they operate through this world is not how your brain operates. So I'm sure Cletus, you have thoughts about that, but absolutely, that is a very real thing. And it's something I wish sort of culturally we talked about more, that the scariest ones are the ones who do fit in polite society, the ones who
Yes.
aren't, they sneak in. Very few are like my stalker, who's just, you know, real out there.
Yeah. Yeah. The smooth ones are the ones you got to be careful of, because they've got lots of experience, lots of time. They've done it many times, and they know the law, and they know how to get around the law.
That's right.
And they usually like to schmooze the police officers. And I've had a penny for every case where some stalkers talked to a police officer and said, and the guy came back, oh, he's a great guy. He just basically bullshit the police officer, and he was a good talker. And then they're a dime a dozen. They're out there all over the place. So those are the ones you
And
got to be careful of.
we also see a lot, and I see this all the times, where the stalker flips it around too, and it's like, oh, well, they're obsessed with me, or
Little
like,
Darvo.
I'm gonna get a restraining order on you, like, because
Yes.
you're doing all of these things, which is part of the like mind fuck. And yeah, it's like takes time and resources to like, I guess, wade through that, but like, yeah. And I'm curious, Cletus, this is sort of just kind of like coming to me, because I think there's probably also people who like maybe they don't start out as like predatory, but we also do have access to so much information in a way, and I think that can like creep up on people, right? Where you're like, you know where it used to be, right, like, okay, you had an ex and they went off and you went off and lived your separate lives, and
Right.
now it's like that information about them or seeing them with a new partner. And one thing, as somebody who has Google alerts set up for all of this, that I see a lot is law enforcement who are stalking maybe an ex because they
Oh yeah.
have access to information. And so, for me, it's always kind of that like scary moment of like, yeah, the calls coming from inside the house of like, again, where people think, oh, these are people I can go to that are going to help me, and not understanding that like they may that they may, yeah, be doing that. And again, bringing people into that without them knowing, of like, oh, can you just keep an eye out for this car? Let me know if you see it, right? Like using the tools that people have access to. And with law enforcement, that's a different set of tools. So is that something that like you've seen firsthand, or experienced, or with people that you know?
Yes. And stalkers come in all professionals. I mean, it could be a firefighter, it could be a police officer, it could be a city council member, it could be anyone. And I always tell people that, and if they use the resources and stuff, it's actually a lot easier to prosecute. My personal opinion is to prosecute and go after them because you have other entities that have to get involved. If you're a firefighter, the city has to get involved in it. If you're a police officer, they definitely have to get involved in it. So it makes it a lot easier to me. But yeah, it becomes in all shapes, sizes, and colors. There's no discriminatory practices on this. And it just, you got to be aware of, I'm trying to say it the right way. I don't want to come off pretty mean. You just got to have a lot of common sense. And what happens if, remember to beware of people bringing you gifts. If someone you don't know brings you gifts, be careful. What's the motive? And I hate to be like that in society because we're all trying to be nice, but just be careful. Most predators are super nice and they want to bring you gifts. They want to assist you. They want to help you. They want to be your buddy, your pal. And now they're inside. And that's dangerous.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know we are, but the thought I had, I knew it was there somewhere, is I think that's also what's so incredible about your the way that you work with folks, and that who may say like, yeah, I have somebody who's either in law enforcement or who works for the city, and I don't like, how do I go to the police to report that, right? But like being able to have other people who are outside of that system to help navigate that and to help be like, okay, we're not going to go to this person, but we're gonna do this instead, and that this is going to be our approach.
Absolutely.
And also, I got a two Cletus this morning. He knows everybody. Like someone, any part, like someone will say, and he'll be like, oh, I know this guy at that division. And then how many years has Leo been in the game? Leo was there forever too, right? Like back in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, Leo came in the 70s. I came in in the 80s. He's been a long time. I mean, we've seen it. Some people, I didn't work internal affairs, but I worked against internal affairs as a defense. A lot of officers have their hands in things, believe it or not. And do they have stalking? Yeah. Part of the threat management unit was also, we actually worked workplace violence. And workplace violence had to do with love triangles. All of them were love triangles. And a lot of them were stalking each other through the phones back and forth. So it was really, and it's really touchy because now you have people with firearms and they're love triangles and you get emotions and stuff like that. So that's a whole different ball game. But I mean, it does get scary because people have access to things. So yeah, we've had that happen before.
Yeah. I remember when I started dating my husband, who's a lawyer, I remember thinking like, whew, if he does anything wrong, I'm going to the bar, which like, I'm sure he'd be horrified if he knew that I thought that, but that was the thing I thought. Because I was so in the height, it was like the worst part of my stalking case, and for me to let any man in, but I just remember thinking that. So yeah, so that there's, again, certain professional organizations, there's, when Cletus was saying about when the problem is coming from inside the house, right? Like, you have people looking. It is easier to prosecute when there are people who have to be involved.
Yeah. It's easier.
Well, I know we're winding down on our time together. Is there anything that you know from your own work? Like, what is there a question I'm not asking that I should be? Is there something that you're like hungry to share with people, or that you want, anything to leave sort of victims with, or, the loved ones of victims and survivors with?
I want everyone to know that we created the three of us created this because of compassion. We love to help people out, and we're all doing separate things, and we all got together as one unit to help people. And I think if the word gets out, what we do, I think we'll be able to help a lot more people. Because I know there's a lot of victims out there, and they're getting misguided, mistreated. And I just think that if they got to us, that we'll be able to get them in the right path and hopefully prevent them from getting hurt and get them in the right direction and try to heal them up a little bit with compassion and stuff. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, those people. And I just want to add to it just how victim survivor centered what we do is, kind of echoing that. Like, as I said, Cletus and I stayed friends, right? This was not, I was working in reality TV for 14 years. This is not a path that I saw myself on, but kind of on my own, because my profile was so out there, people would come to me and ask for, and I started just kind of doing these things. And then one day Cletus was like, why aren't you an investor? Like, why aren't you doing this? And he was so encouraging. And to me, that says so much, to literally place a victim survivor in your company, and they, even though they're the experts, they defer to me on a lot of the emotional stuff, which you don't get that. That was never, you know, and just truly the trauma informed nature of things, just the way when I hear them talking to people, like, this is so special. This is something which should be the norm, and sadly it's not the norm. And I'm really hoping that, you know, what we're doing is as groundbreaking as we think it all is. Like, there isn't anything like this. There is no, we don't have a competitor. So it's not, it's like, if you don't like us, go somewhere else. No, there's nobody else, because we are really carving this path. And even the idea that PIs would work in this way, like, that's new. It's new,
Yeah.
and it's really exciting, and it's emerging. And we're like constantly finding all the new ways we can help people, the ways we can be useful, the ways we can support people. So it's like, it's really cool. You know, and just the openness and the frankness and the conversation is, you know, it is a business. So there is that aspect of it, you know. And we're just hoping that eventually, you know, it just gets to a place where we are able, we're still in the early stages, but, you know, like, we'll see, right? It's exciting. It's very exciting. And they get excited seeing them help people. Like, I hear it, I see it with them. Like, when they do the thing, whatever the thing is, right? Like, it's awesome. And I know that was not my experience prior to this. There was, you know, there was none of that. And so to feel that kind of support across the board, it's awesome. And I feel really proud. I feel really proud because a lot of times as survivors, we're frustrated, we're scared, we're convinced real serious harm is about to happen to us. And to be able to actually have like a solution is awesome. So that's where we are with it. And it's great.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can so picture this and so hope that, you know, things can seem so hard or impossible until you see other people doing it. And that aside from helping victims, that you're also creating this blueprint for folks in other states, you know, for people who aren't in California and Nevada, and to be able to yeah, to kind of continue to build this work and create that network and community, to deal with things in a different way.
But they do work across the US, just so you know. Like, we're physically based here, but that doesn't mean that we can't take on cases elsewhere. And that
Got it.
people. So I want to, like, because I think as we grow, because again, you might be able to you can Google and find a PI anywhere, but they're not going to have the expertise that we have. So, you know, that's why you would come to us and
Exactly.
go elsewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's also, you know, I mean, you are an intrepid team of three. And also just, but yeah, that there's more, you know, people and resources needed. And by you showing that this is an effective method, you know, I imagine that's going to open, you know, a lot of other doors to say, like, here's, you know, here's the proof, here's how it works, and this is what we need, this is how we need to be resources, this is where funding needs to go. And yeah, well, I am so appreciative of you both taking the time to unpack all of this. And it is, yeah, really new and exciting. And I think, you know, so often people hit just, you know, they're in that maze alone and they hit a wall and it's like, where do you go next? It's so disorienting. Like you said, Cletus, and like we know, people being re-victimized by the system. So thank you for just kind of like demystifying this. Thank you for the work you do. And I'm so glad that, you know, that Lenora and you made your ways to each other.
Yeah.
Even as she navigated her horrible experience, but really speaks to you and your level of care and the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having us on. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.